Hi students, good morning all of you. Today we take up the 7th chapter, Selection Control Structures. So far we have completed 6 chapters. In the first 5 chapters we learned all the basic concepts of C language formally and practically. There are around 100 concepts and 100 programs. If you study all the concepts and execute the corresponding programs and all that, you own the corresponding concept. You never forget. I am using the word owning. That means, like your experience, you register that concept in your brain. Simply studying concept, reading the concept, you cannot own it. It is like car driving. Car driving, you cannot learn in the classroom. Only theoretical experience, you cannot drive the car. Theoretical experience, theoretical knowledge will help you, no doubt about that. But ultimately, you must drive the car, and few errors are must. Once you are able to drive the car, then the theoretical knowledge is not required. Automatically, it is reached in your brain. This domain is such that in this, every concept you have to apply, then only you can own it, beyond doubt. So, follow this 100 concepts, and 100 programs you perform. Thereafter, if you have an interest to learn, to know international standards and all that, ECCP exam you write. ECCP exam A group. A group is based on 1 to 5 chapters. 1 to 5 chapters. And if you write ECCP exam, you can understand what are the international standards and how much depth you have to go in your study. You can understand. That I cannot describe that. Simply writing ECCP exam, you can understand that. After writing each exam just 1 hour, 20 questions. At the end of writing the paper, then your marks are evaluated and displayed, and at the same time you can get the answers also for all the questions whatever you attempted. By that you can understand. If you want a ECCP book as a video book, very shortly I am going to release that also. Now, in that way, A group just crystallize, then prepare for the B group. And as far as 6th chapter is concerned, its nature is entirely different. Actually, all the programming concepts, basic concepts like methodologies, program development process, and all other allied concepts I have given in one place. I don't expect that you master all the concepts simply by hearing or reading, but you can have overall idea what are the programming concepts, what are the characteristics of a program, what we have to do, what not to do, all that you can learn. And program designing, program implementation, all that I explained. Then that knowledge is very much useful, and if you are advancing with the further chapters, you can better understand those concepts so practically. That knowledge is very essential, and from this chapter onwards, all those concepts you can practically view. Now, in this chapter, we study the implementation. Actually, already have seen design approaches. Designing methodologies, top-down approach and bottom-up approach. As far as C is concerned, top-down approach of designing we adopt. Now, after designing, the next step is implementation. In programming or in real life, the same approaches are adopted for implementation of various tasks. So, first let us consider the approaches, the implementation approaches in real life. There are mainly 3 approaches. 1, sequential approach. Second, selection approach. Third, iterative approach. iteration approach. Now, sequential approach. Sequential approach means we perform all the activities sequentially. Now, many programs you implement, now you perform jobs sequentially, perform activities sequentially. Suppose you have attended this class. For this, a set of activities you performed implemented sequentially. That is, you dressed up, went to your parking, started your vehicle, drove the vehicle up to this building, again parked the vehicle in the parking, reached the lift, took the lift, and came to this classroom and settled in your seat. If you see, there are 8 activities you implemented sequentially. Suppose you are reading this book, how you read? Line by line you read. After first page is over, you read second page, then third page, like that. This is sequential approach. Most jobs, we implement them sequentially. Then that is called sequential approach. It is a very common approach. And second one, selection approach. If you want to implement all the jobs sequentially, it is not an efficient approach. Suppose, for example, you have to find out the telephone number of Ramesh T. Then you take the telephone directory. Will you follow the sequential approach? Sequential approach means from first page onwards, all the names you have to set. At least before Ramesh, there may be 50,000 names if you are in a city. Understand? So then you have to make minimum 50,000 futile efforts, and then you can find out Ramesh T's phone number. Understand? You never do that. That means sequential approach is not appropriate for this type of task. For implementing this task, sequential approach is not suitable. Which approach? Selection approach. What is the selection? Selection means there is a condition. What is the condition? Then top index. On the top index, RAM is the condition. If now you search for the top index RAM, and once you find out RAM top index, you can know that name is in that page. So for this, what you do? Just it is you open the book. Suppose you got, as soon as you open, you got NAT. Then what you do? Then if you get NAT, what you do? You go towards right. Somewhere you find, after a few 3 futile attempts, you find RAM. Then what you do? Now you know that the Ramesh is in that page. Then you adopt sequential approach. Somewhere by taking a clue. Then you can find out Ramesh T. Am I right? So this is the approach. So here, in all cases, sequential approach is not efficient. So this is called selection approach. In selection approach, always a condition is there. The condition is true, you behave in one fashion. The condition is false, you behave in a different fashion. Next, third approach is iterative approach. Iterative approach means repetition. The same job you repeat many times. Suppose you have to pour 10 liters of milk. Then 10 liters of milk, you have 1 liter mug. Then the same action, that is, what is the action? You have to pour 1 liter of milk. How many times you perform the action? You perform that action for 10 times. Then 10 liters of milk 10 times you pour, your task is performed. And in this, one variant is there. In this case, beforehand, before taking up the task, you know that how many iterations are required. But in all cases, it is not possible. Suppose, one more example, poem. You have to learn by heart a poem. A poem. Then what you do? You recite it. How many times you recite it? You do not know. Until you memorize the poem, you recite it like this. Then, at one point of time, you are able to memorize the poem. You get the confidence that you memorize the poem. Then you stop that. This is N. N. After achieving the task, you are able to understand how many iterations you did. So, there are two variants in that, in iteration approach. Some you know beforehand, some after achieving the task you can know. So, these are the real-time approaches for implementation of jobs. In programming also, the same strategy, same approaches are adopted for implementation of the jobs. Many times I told you, our jobs we are interesting to the computer, to a computer. So the nature of job never be changed. So whatever strategies we are implementing in real life, the same strategies we adopt in programming also. That point always you remember. That's why C language provides three types of control structures: sequential control structure, and selection control structures, and iteration control structures. Iteration control structures are loop control structures. As far as sequential control structure is a default one, by default, all statements are executed sequentially. That is the sequential approach. As far as selection and iteration are concerned, we should have a special focus, because a big mechanism is provided for selection as control structures, selection control structures. A big mechanism is provided by way of these statements: if else, else if, switch, conditional operators. Now, selection control structures, C provides a big mechanism by way of all these tools: if else if, switch, conditional operators. They have different features. All are selection only. They have different features. In different situations, we can use the correct one, what a suitable one. And in the same way, iteration, that means loop. C provides three types of loops: while loop, for loop, do while loop. Do while loop. All these statements are also known as control flow statements. Control flow statements. Actually, you must understand what is the flow of control. Flow of control means the order of execution of statements. The order of execution of statements. These statements change the order. What is the default order? Default order is sequential. Then the selection and iteration control structures change the order of execution. If one condition is true, one set of statements are executed. Condition is false, other set of statements are executed. In this way, they change the order, the flow order, flow of control, and that's why these are also called control flow statements. And in this context, we have to discuss other type of statement, jump statements. Jump statements are, these are also known as transfer of control statements. Then, in particular situation, you have to practically understand these statement, jump statement, transfer the control from one place to other place. For that, certain statements are provided. Those are break, continue, return, return, go to. Now, these are the statements. In this chapter, mainly we focus on selection control statements. Selection control statement, if else, nesting of if else, else if, switch, and conditional operators. In the fourth chapter, operators, I have already introduced the conditional operators. And those actually as a part of operators, I introduced that. Actually, that mechanism, those operators are part of selection control structures, because you know that those are useful for performing a selection. A condition is there, a relational expression or logical expression is there. If it is true, this is printed. If it is false, this is printed. This is the approach. This is the selection. If it is true, this is printed. This is executed. This is false. This is executed. This is nothing but a selection. So, in this way, the sequential approach is changed by introducing a condition in the selection statements. So, in this chapter, we study all these mechanisms thoroughly and practically.